Hey everybody, and hello humans. This is Not a Robot's Marvel Weekly Comic Review Show. This week, we don't have any King in Black tie-ins to cover, but we don't have any shortage of comics. This week, we're covering Nonstop Spider-Man #1, Thor and Loki Double Trouble #1, Children of the Atom #1, Deadpool's Nerdy 30 #1, Immortal Hulk #44, Strange Academy #9, Eternals #3, Taskmaster #4, Daredevil #28, and Wolverine Black, White, and Blood #4. My name is Kirk. I was bit by a radioactive microphone, and I've got some amazing co-hosts here with me. Nicole?
Hey, so it's Nicole. How's everyone doing?
Good. And Brandon?
Hello there.
We're here to summarize, analyze, and editorialize every issue we cover without worrying about what the publishers think. We are on Twitter at Not a Robot Comics. I'm on Twitter at Kirk Hopko. Nicole is on Twitter at Maddie Nick Nick. And Brandon's on Twitter at Chandler the Changing Man with underscores between those words.
My Instagram feed's going to blow up.
We answer all show mail sent to notarobotcomics@gmail.com. The next part is dedicated to those that support us with their hard-earned money, but that's not the only way you can. Like, subscribe, download, and share our episodes as much as possible. It helps get the word out, and that's the best kind of advertising. Now is the time to say a big thank you to the humans who help support the podcast. They subscribe to our Patreon with tiers starting at just $1 a month, so that we can make sure to keep bringing you more content. This is the Not a Robot Must Be a Human shout-out and roll call. And that shout-out goes to our humans, Weird Science Jim, Blue Mondays, Hollister, and Roch Crockett. A big salute to all of you and an even bigger thank you. So what are you waiting for? Sign up now and show us you might just be a human after all and get a shout-out on the Not a Robot Must Be a Human roll call. All right, guys. Anything new going on this week?
I don't think so. Not over here.
Yeah, no, not much to say. Guess the big build-up to Falcon Winter Soldier, right?
Oh, yeah.
Should be fun.
Right? Couple new clips shown on social media just to get the hype generated.
Very exciting.
We would also like to draw attention to, some of you may have noticed, Not a Robot Podcasts is expanding to the Not a Robot Podcast Network. The Not a Robot banner is now not going to include just comics, but there's also an anime show, a TV and movies show, gaming show, horror podcast, War of Film, and many more coming to notarobotpodcast.com. Come join us for the ride as we get bigger and bigger, humans. You ain't seen nothing yet. And now we're going to jump into our week's reviews. And we're going to start at the top with Nonstop Spider-Man #1. This is brought to us by writer Joe Kelly, artist on pencils Chris Bachalo, inks Tim Townsend, color artist Marcio Meniz, and letterer VC's Travis Lanham. Nonstop Spider-Man #1 jumps in with a bit of an action-oriented approach to Spider-Man. We see him jumping and immediately assessing the types of decisions he's made as he can see thugs or highly armed, highly equipped, well-trained thugs pulling up to an apartment that we're not sure is Peter's at first, but we later learn is not. As he goes through these very quick lightning round decisions and analyzing what's going through his head, and we're seeing sort of this dynamic Peter process as he's going through. We see him fight off these thugs, and then it starts shedding the backstory that a friend of his has just died, and in a sort of suspect way. And him and another friend have been dealing with it sort of together, and as the fight with these thugs really kicks into high gear, he also receives a message that the mysterious drug that his friend had taken before he died, his other friend who had been dealing with the grief has now just taken, and he has to go from this fight to the scene of someone who may have just overdosed on a mysterious drug, and it sort of earns the title Nonstop Spider-Man from there. The action in this comic is really just high octane right out of the get-go, and it ends after that with a teaser of what's to come with a very non-Spider-Man villain, Baron Zemo, meeting with a group of heads of Hydra and showing that he has a disdain for Hydra's current objective and that he has his own plans. And we can see that he's going to be involved with the Spider-Man play. And if you were reading any of the news pieces that led up to Nonstop Spider-Man, you know they wanted to tell a story that didn't read exactly like a Spider-Man story, but still captured his essence. And I'm honestly really excited about where this one's going to go. The story left a lot open in terms of how Peter Parker and Baron Zemo are really going to come head to head. And I can't wait. What were your thoughts, Nicole?
So I really liked it, but I will say that the Spider-Man comics, I feel a little bit more in the other Spider-Man, but also this one. It's just, I don't know. It's a little bit, it's not boring, but it feels very formulaic. And like, you know, it's a classic Spider-Man. Who doesn't love Spider-Man? But I also felt, for me personally, like, it seems to be more targeted toward like a younger audience than what I am. And so I did like it, but it was just kind of not really my thing. I gave it a 6.
Awesome. And Brandon?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was an interesting approach. It's great to see Chris Bachalo back doing Spider-Man. I think he does a very solid job, particularly when paired with this colorist. And it's also great to see Joe Kelly back doing Spider-Man, and doing him in a way that's unconventional, just kind of constant motion, constant action. But I do agree that there are definitely some moments that are trying to be a bit more trendy, trying to appeal to a younger audience, and I don't know how that may work with everyone. I know that there were definitely some moments that didn't entirely jive with me. But like I said, I did really like the approach, and I found the backup story particularly interesting, especially with the introduction of Baron Zemo, and also artistically in the backup story, you know, Dale Eaglesham is someone who never misses, and I just loved seeing his rendering of Baron Zemo. So I felt like it was a pretty solid debut. If you're looking for a Spider-Man story that's a bit different, because I would say it's not entirely conventional, a little non-conventional in the use of constant motion, but definitely there's some formulaic moments. But if you're looking for something a little more offbeat, I'd definitely say check it out. So I'd probably give this one about a 7.5, maybe a 7.
All right. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. You are right that it is formulaic in its Spider-Man approach, but it works for me, and I am excited to see where it goes. And I really hope that it wasn't just overhyped in what I was reading about what the writer wanted to do with this, how he wanted to sort of reflect Zemo and Spider-Man off each other in a new way that neither of those heroes and villains have ever been able to do with their usual rogues gallery. I'm excited to see where it's going to go. I gave it a 7.5. I also really just like the way they depict Spider-Sense in this specific style.
Yeah.
And it's not completely unique to this issue, I don't think. I think I've seen it maybe once or twice before, where Spider-Sense is commonly shown with just like lines and then Peter explaining what he's sensing. But this one had sort of this dramatic text appearing behind him saying, "Get down, look behind you, move." And as a aesthetic choice, it really worked for me, and it's not something I'm used to seeing in a lot of Spider-Man styles.
Yeah.
So I gave this one a 7.5. And with that said, let's move on to Thor and Loki Double Trouble #1. Take it away, Nikki.
So this one it can be best described as a Thor and Loki anime. It is basically your typical Thor and Loki story. It starts off with Thor, showing off, showing how strong he is, got Mjolnir there. And then, Loki comes up, they have a little banter. And Loki turns himself into a horse, and then Thor is seen beating up the horse, and so people scatter. It's a pretty typical story. It was very cute, for sure. You don't really learn a whole lot. I kind of feel like most of this wasn't, I don't know, it didn't feel like a story. It felt more like a skit. But it ends with a huge dragon coming down and falling in love with Loki and not liking Thor.
All right, and what did you think of it?
So, I thought it was really cute. Who doesn't love the Thor and Loki dynamic? They're a classic duo, everybody, It was very entertaining, but it doesn't really feel like a first issue of like a story. It very much feels like you're already supposed to know these guys, although it does a very good job of portraying them. I gave this a 7.
All right, and Brandon?
Yeah, this story was definitely very cute, particularly in the art style. I think that just kind of goes without saying. It's got a very childlike, almost animation style to it. And I think maybe this book might be more satisfying for a younger audience. At least I know I felt that way, just because it felt, I don't know, it felt very childish at times, and it was kind of hard for me to get into it as much as I might have liked. So I didn't really have a lot of thoughts on this one. Just, I felt like, maybe this isn't necessarily geared towards me. I thought the interactions between Loki and Thor were pretty entertaining, but again, in kind of like a childlike way. So I gave this one a 5.5 out of 10, maybe a 6 on a good day.
Yeah, with this one, I felt that the comic itself was enjoyable, and we touched on this a little bit last week, where some of the comics that, in hindsight, you realize that they might be aimed at a different audience, or they might be telling a very specific story. It struggled with me in that way, not only because it was awfully childlike, and it very much read like an episode of a children's cartoon. Mm. We have the boastful jock, and then the cunning mischief trickster tells him, oh, go steal this thing, it'll be great. And then he falls for it, and then, oh no, something bad happens because of it. It's very, very formulaic children's entertainment in that way.
Yeah.
Was it well drawn? Yeah, it was cute. And was it well written? The character dynamic is fun. But it does make me think, and this is probably going to be a discussion that we could take to an entire bonus episode.
Yeah.
But walking into this comic, I didn't assume, and maybe I should have by the art style, but I don't know. I didn't assume that we'd get something that was entirely outside of canon.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that either.
So it just being Asgard currently is happy-go-lucky, and everyone in Asgard is nice, and we don't even know if the Earth is remotely aware of what's going on with Asgard, but they're just goofing around with horses and dragons in Asgard. And, it was very not what's happening in the comics between Thor and Loki. They're not just goofy brothers, giving each other, this guy behind the camera.
Yeah.
So, and it does make me wonder, how often should Marvel make clear, hey, this comic is outside of a continuity. If you're looking to read what's happening with Thor and Loki right now, is this the comic that's going to do that? And in that regard, I don't think it is, but I don't know if that holds any quality against the comic. It's just something that I observed.
I know, I think this is like a spiritual successor to another book that they did similar to this. I'm pretty sure it was the same writer and artist with Spider-Man and Venom. So I think you can just kind of, look at it and say, well, this probably isn't in any kind of continuity. This is just kind of geared towards a younger audience, and obviously they're not going to be worried about what's currently going on in Thor and all that stuff. They don't know, and they don't need to know, because it's simplistic enough that you can just kind of jump in and read it. Which is why, like I said, I think it works better targeted for a younger audience. But yeah, it didn't really work as much for me, and that's probably just because I'm reading Thor separately. So, it's I don't really... this doesn't really have any place in my catalog, if I'm being honest.
Right, yeah. I ended up giving it a 6 because it was certifiably enjoyable, but it really wasn't for me, and it's something that I could see other people enjoying a lot more. With that said, yeah, it definitely, at the end of it, I just felt like, we've got a Beta Ray Bill series coming up. We've got Thor ongoing right now.
I so can't wait for that Beta Ray Bill series.
Right? I'm really excited. Yeah. And so with all of that there, I was kind of hoping that, even if it was without knowing about the Double Trouble sort of being its own thing, I kind of was wondering, are we going to get a Thor and Loki buddy cop at the same time as this Beta Ray Bill? That could be a really cool sort of scene. And this one ending up being its own sort of mini cartoon series, or I really like what Nicole said, just sort of a Thor and Loki anime.
Yeah.
It's funny, and it works. It just doesn't work, I don't think, 5 stars across the board.
Yeah.
And so Thor and Loki Double Trouble was brought to us by writer Mariko Tamaki, artist Gurahiru, and letterer VC's Ariana Mar. So now we've got Children of the Atom #1 by writer Vita Ayala, artist Bernard Chang, color artist Marcello Maiolo, and lettering by Travis Lanham. Children of the Atom introduces us to a new Young Mutants team. We've got Cherub, Marvel Guy, Daycrawler, Gimmick, and Cyclops Lass. Which, by the way, I'm taking points off just for the name of Cyclops Lass. I don't like it. I'm sorry, guys. No, joking aside, we're introduced to this new team of people with very similar powers. Cyclops Lass obviously being Cyclops, Cherub being Angel, Daycrawler being Nightcrawler, Gimmick being Gambit, and Marvel Guy, I honestly didn't have a note for who he was because I didn't get enough panels paying attention to him, I don't think.
I'm assuming just Marvel Girl?
Oh, duh,
yeah,
probably.
Jean Grey? I mean...
Yeah, I don't think I was thinking that through when I took these notes. Yeah. So we're introduced to them fighting off a team of mutants who lost their powers in the No More Mutants debacle, and they have now taken to a life of crime. So these kids, they fight them off, they do okay, and then they have to make a quick getaway because not only in a pretty violent scene right now that they're getting away, but this is taking place during Outlawed, and there's a minor tie-in to Outlawed here where they talk about how young superheroes aren't supposed to be operating right now. Doesn't really go into it in depth, but you know, we get a hint on it, and we get a couple panels in Krakoa of the X-Men, Storm, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey talking about their responsibility to kids like these who aren't coming to Krakoa. And they talk about whether or not they should force them to come to Krakoa because it's their home, because they're in danger. They sort of talk a little bit about the ramifications of where they're at, where not just mutants are choosing not to come to Krakoa, but young mutants who every person on their team has been there to see a young mutant suffer horrible consequences because an X-Men wasn't there to help them. And they have to deal with these choices. And it's a really interesting conversation for the few panels that we get to explore that. Then it cuts into the sort of the Children of the Atom's daily high school life. We find out that they haven't wanted to go to Krakoa yet for sort of an unknown reason. Then they talk a lot about their lives, why they don't want to leave. We see a little bit more of that, how the rest of the world views Krakoa and how the mutants are building an army to take over everyone. Just a couple different perspectives here. And then a lot about just high school romance and who likes who and who's dramatic and what it is to be a teenager and not fit in. It's all very in line with a lot of iconic X-Men motifs, a lot of young teenagers who are different from their peers. It's definitely something that people have identified with in X-Men literature before, so I'm not surprised to see it here. And then the piece ends with them finally deciding to go to Krakoa, and something sort of interferes with that in an exciting way that will be explained in future issues. So, Nicole, what did you think of Children of the Atom?
So I'm a big fan of the X-Men, and I'm just as big of a fan of the knockoff X-Men. I like them a lot. They have a really, I feel like it's kind of formulaic in the same way that Spider-Man is, but it's also like it's a little bit different. Like like X-Men can be silly, but it can also be very heavy. And this was one of those comics that I just kind of like, you know, I like read it and then I kind of had to like sit back for a minute, like, you know, it's kind of one of those series where like it's goofy sometimes and then other times it kind of like hits you like a brick wall. But I did really like this one and I gave it an 8.
Oh, wow. Awesome. And Brandon?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid stage setter. This series has like been kind of weird. It's been delayed for basically a year. And it's just kind of been perpetually out of reach. So the anticipation has definitely been there. And I also read an interview with the writer, Vita Ayala, who kind of talked about the influences in this book. And one of those was the kind of like rise of mutant culture during Grant Morrison's New X-Men, where you had a lot of teenagers who were basically just saying, like, I want to be mutants, essentially. And so I think it's kind of fitting that you would have this book when, you know, mutants are more popular than ever, given all the Krakoa stuff that's going on. So, like I said, this is a book that's, it's certainly a very solid stage setter. It's almost it's like riding the line between being a book that fits comfortably in the Dawn of X catalog, but at the same time being a book that stands on its own. And I expressed this point earlier. It's almost like Sword in that way, where you never really know where it's going to fall. Like they're in that same way. But like I said, I really enjoyed all the stage setting stuff. I loved the kind of interactions between each of the new characters, and I felt like it established them in a way that's fairly natural. Like they feel like believable high schoolers, even if some of the drama can be a little formulaic. And then, I love seeing basically Cyclops and Wolverine, Jean Grey, and all those guys try and figure out, what they're going to do with these people. So it was just a lot of interesting stuff, and I think I'm at least curious to see where the series goes next. But I would probably give this one a 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8 out of 10 on a good day.
Yeah, I had an all right time with it. My only piece is I really hope that it goes somewhere that earns this setup. I found that some of the traditional teenage themes in the middle of this book went on a little bit longer than I would have originally liked, but I'm getting older and my tastes are changing when it comes to reading about these, teenagers who want to feel different, especially with the advent of the twist at the end when you figure out that there's something else to these mutants. Definitely highlights that this could be very interesting, but also has some of those recurring themes of teenagers and sort of growing into themselves. So I gave this one a 7.5 as well. It's good. It's a good setup, and I hope that it takes off, and I hope that it delivers and doesn't just bog itself down with sort of teen angst, because it's very easy to trap yourself in that.
But at the same time, what would the X-Men be without teen angst? Or angst in general, I guess.
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I believe there's a line in the next book that we're covering where it literally says, take some angst and slap an X on it, and that's how we make our money.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. So now we get to Deadpool's Nerdy 30. Number 1, technically, though this is just an anthology issue featuring a bunch of short stories from Deadpool's storied career as the Merc with a Mouth. It's got Immaculate Conception by writer Joe Kelly and artist Gerardo Sandoval, color artist Chris Sotomayor. Baby's First Cable by writer Scotty Young, artist Aaron Conley, and color artist Jean-Francois Boyeux. Best There Is by writer Kelly Thompson, artist Kevin Labranda with Bob Quinn, and color artist Rochelle Rosenberg. Lo, There Shall Come a Hero Maybe by writer Fabian Nicieza, Patch Zurcher, and color artist Hava Tartaglia. Short story Tale by writer Gail Simone, artist Michael Shelfer, and color artist Jim Carolampidis. No Chill Whatsoever by writer Daniel Way, artist Paco Medina, and color artist Jesus Abertov. Party for One by writer Jerry Duggan and Brian Posehn, artist Scott Koblish, and color artist Nick Filardi. And The Tao of Pool by writer Rob Liefeld and Chad Bowers, with artist Rob Liefeld, color artist Brian Valenza, J. David Ramos, and Federico Blee, making up this 8 short story anthology with lettering by VC's Joe Sabino all the way through. What follows in here is a collection of 8 very short stories. This is a 46-page anthology covering 8 stories. So you're looking at like some 5-page stories here, with stories covering really just like goofy Deadpool-related sketch comedy, as well as a couple interesting nods and references. You have sketches about Cable coming from the future to stop Deadpool from existing, and other Cables coming to stop Cable, and other Cables to stop Cable from stopping Cable. Time travel stuff. You have Deadpool's first meeting with Wolverine, maybe. You have Deadpool talking about how he's going to design his costume. You've got Deadpool working with Agent X, his sort of self-clone body double. You've got an entire bottle episode of Deadpool literally just in a box underneath the water going crazy, or crazy for Deadpool standards. And couple more, and a lot of them, like I said, they're sketch comedy. They focus a lot just on a couple different aspects of Deadpool that you might get a kick out of reading here or there. Nicole, what'd you think?
I don't know. This felt very much like it felt like a sketch comedy. Like, it didn't feel like cohesive stories. Like, I mean, I love Deadpool as much as the next guy, but like, it just didn't really do much for me. I gave it a 4.
Oof.
Oh, wow. And Brandon, did you say you had gotten to this one?
Well, I didn't get to finish all of it. I had read a couple of the short stories, but I had done some research on the book, as I want to do. That's just, I guess that's who I am. In this podcast, I'm going to be the information guy. That's just how it's going to be, I guess. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I guess this is like kind of the lineup of all-stars of Deadpool writers. Full disclosure, I'm not the biggest Deadpool fan. Sometimes it can kind of work, sometimes not, but I can't really think of any instance where I've really tried to finish a run on Deadpool or anything like that. Like, I could take them in small chunks. But for the ones that I read, it seemed to be, kind of fun, one and done stories involving Deadpool. Some were enjoyable, some not so much. The ones that I did get a chance to read were the ones by Gail Simone, Daniel Way, Jerry Duggan, and Kelly Thompson. And those ones were pretty enjoyable, at least. I'd say of those, I probably enjoyed the one from Jerry Duggan the most. And I know he had a pretty extensive run on Deadpool that most people liked. But I'd say for the ones that I read, nothing particularly stand out, just kind of a run-of-the-mill anthology, and it's sure to please any hardcore Deadpool fans who are super familiar with this list of creators. So for me, I'd probably give this one a 6 out of 10, maybe a 6.5 on a good day. Nothing too stand out, but I think it would probably work more for a Deadpool fan than it would for me.
I had an okay time with this. It was goofy, but nothing really was given any of the time to generate impact. So it really was aiming to sell you that Deadpool kitsch.
Yeah.
A lot of one-liners and a lot of puns, and even making jokes about trying to make puns, which is just a goldmine sometimes. But in this, because nothing was really given the attention, it doesn't land exceedingly well. So I gave it a 5.5, but I do have a caveat that I think this book could be a 7.5.
Oh?
For a very specific avenue. I give it a 5.5 because if you're looking to add something to your library that you're going to be happy to have, I don't think this is really going to be where you want to go. But I give it a 7.5, not for myself, but if you've got a Deadpool fan in your life who's got a birthday coming up, this is it's a small little book, and it's just like, hey, I know you like Deadpool, and even if you don't read comics, you can put this in your bathroom and giggle about, haha, Deadpool shot himself through the arm or something, regular Deadpool stuff. And I think it works in that way. I think it's an excellent gift, which kind of fits for its Deadpool's 30th anniversary. It's not really a run. It doesn't require you to know where Deadpool's at. It has nothing to do with his current reign on Staten Island.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of just one and done self-contained stories that are sure to please any hardcore fan. So, like I said, I think it'll work for some people. Probably didn't work as much for me just because I don't have that emotional connection. But I like that they brought a lot of the old creators back. That's great. Like I said, it's great to see Joe Kelly on Nonstop Spider-Man, and I guess he wrote Deadpool at some point too. So it's cool to see him back here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so now, Brandon, if you want to take us away with Immortal Hulk number 44.
I would love to. So Immortal Hulk 44 features the currently depowered version of the Hulk, basically facing off against the UFOs. We start with some opening narration from Henry Gyrich, who, for those who are familiar with Marvel lore, is basically the standard bureaucrat figure throughout Marvel. Every time he shows up, it's usually some connection to the government, and he has to step in and take force in some way. So it's always fun to see him here, but at present he is serving as the commander of Alpha Flight, and he is overseeing the UFOs who are basically trying to take down the Hulk. And that's kind of the majority of the issue, really just showing the UFOs their specific power set and how they're using it to take down a depowered Hulk. Intercut with that is the second narrative that's kind of building upon the last issue, where the Doctor, who is stuck in the body of Walter Lankowski, also known as basically the big beast creature from Alpha Flight.
Oh, Sasquatch. Sorry.
Yeah. I like totally spaced on that for some reason. I have no idea why. But anyway, basically they're trying to get back to Shadow Base because Shadow Base had been destroyed by the first enemy in an earlier issue, and they're basically trying to get him back so they can get the Doctor back into his body. So this issue is kind of just tying up some loose ends while also setting up some new mysteries, because as we move towards the end and the UFOs are really getting an upper hand on the depowered Hulk, one of the UFOs is basically able to reverse the gamma within Hulk and use that to send him back into his Joe Fixit persona, and then from that point kill him. And at the end of the issue we reveal that both Joe Fixit and the depowered Hulk persona are now in the below place, where they see basically this giant version of the leader just staggering over them, and that's how we end. Yeah, I would say overall this issue does a really great job of highlighting the best parts of Immortal Hulk, which is the body horror, which is a lot of the recurring elements. So you kind of see a back and forth between the UFOs that mirrors some of the stuff that's set up on the beginning of the issue and pays off at the end of the issue. It does a really great job of that. For me, it just kind of continues the trend of how much I love Immortal Hulk and doesn't really change in that. And I'm definitely interested to see what's going to happen with Joe Fixit and Hulk now that they are in the below place. So this one I gave easily an 8.5 out of 10. I just really enjoy the series. I love this issue. I love seeing Al Ewing's depiction of the UFOs. And of course, it goes without saying that Joe Bennett's art is absolutely amazing in bringing a horror edge to this series. So I absolutely love it.
Awesome. And Nicole?
So, I did not go into this knowing that it was like it was going to be like that kind of gross. And I really liked the art style, actually. Like, that was probably the part of it that I liked the most, and that's probably why I actually finished it, because I like had to like put my hand over some of these like panels. Like gore is just personally not something I'm super into, but like one trope that I kind of just like my brain can't really handle is like the body horror, like body snatching almost. Like I can't, like something about it just really freaks me out. But I did really like it. I gave it a 7.
Awesome. Yeah, for this one, I gave it a 7.5. I enjoyed it. The UFOs were neat, and I really liked sort of, like you said, that anti-gamma piece, that reversing it and bringing out Joe Fixit. I was here for. The body horror isn't really my greatest cup of tea either, but I see it and I can see why it works so well with something like the Hulk.
Oh yeah.
Especially in an issue focused on the Hulk and the leader and things like that, where it really is just sort of like the grotesque gigantification that happens from gamma radiation and things like that.
Yeah.
That there is a place for them to explore that, and I'm glad that they're doing it. Though I'm also not the biggest fan of it. That said, my only complaint really with this issue, and maybe it was just because I haven't spent a lot of time with the Immortal Hulk series, is the B plot being sort of the leader and Rick Jones sharing a body coming apart piece, as well as the UFOs beating up the Hulk and the Hulk being sort of this disfigured version of himself, and then the Rick Jones leader being a disfigured version of himself. I did lose exactly which body horror I was looking at sometimes.
Yeah.
And I had to figure out by like supporting dialogue and read a couple panels again. So I did just get lost a little bit. So that's what kept this one at a 7.5 for me, was that it just, the art flew off the page, but what was happening didn't necessarily.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's weird. I'm not a big body horror guy or even a horror guy at all. And yet, this past year I've been reading like more horror comics than at any other point in my life. Like most of the independent comics I read are either horror based. I suddenly subscribed to a horror comic anthology. I'm reading this, and Marvel put out like a Cronenberg horror version of Fantastic Four a couple months ago. And I don't know like what it is about. Maybe it's just how horrible this the last year was, but like something about horror lately in comics has just been really pulling me in. So I don't know. Maybe this is just an evolution in the stage of my life.
All right. Immortal Hulk 44, like Brandon said, was brought to us by writer Al Ewing, artist Joe Bennett on pencils, Ryu Jose and Bellardino Bravo on inks, Paul Mounts as the color artist, and lettering by VC's Corey Pettit. And so now we go to Strange Academy number 9 by writer Scotty Young, artist Humberto Ramos, color artist Edgar Delgado, and lettering by VC's Clayton Cowles. In this issue, we find the continuation of the Strange Academy series, which is, focusing on these young sort of, I'll call them Marvel hero adjacent characters who, you can see the trends that link them to the bigger scenes in Marvel. We've got Doyle Dormammu and, the daughter of a frost giant. We've got a couple Asgardian children and a fairy from Otherworld. Like, so there's a lot of different characters here, and this one focuses a bit more on, I have the one kid's name here, Calvin, who sort of been led to us as like the normal American kid in most of the issues. He likes snacks and video games and TV, and where all of these other classmates are from fantastical places. We find out that Calvin is from a series of less than stellar foster homes. And we get a couple shots of him and his magic leather jacket in a foster home, and it doesn't go well for the people involved there. And we see that he doesn't come from a place of happiness, and it cuts to, him having these dreams or nightmares, if you will, with him then at school in time for Parents' Day, which leads to sort of a split plot where we have the Parents' Day stuff where all the parents of a lot of these characters show up, though we have Loki show up for the Asgardian twins as, their fun uncle to spend the day with them. We get to see the normal human parents of Emily. They show up and they're just baffled by all the crazy stuff that's going on at this academy. And then they go off and they play games. They have to retrieve a statue from a magic place with teams with their parents. They have to run through a maze of destruction and death. But then we get sort of this bonding moment between Calvin, who we have learned doesn't have parents, and Doyle Dormammu, the son of the Dread Dormammu, who obviously is not getting a free pass up to Earth to take part in Parents' Day. And so they end up on sort of a list of chores that backfire, and they get in each other's grill. They sort of talk a lot about sort of their respective backgrounds, and it culminates with both a little bit of drama between them and then sort of that usual Strange Academy vibe that we're getting of them, of these kids coming together, of them, you just really can't beat the bonds you make in high school type of deal. And then it ends with a few more links to that, more Parents' Day goings on, some more dramatic events are going to be happening to these kids, and potentially even a field trip, it looks like. So what did you think, Nicole?
I like this one a lot. Like, it was kind of a little bit tropey and a little bit formulaic, but I really enjoyed all of it, and I think that the story has a really nice heart. And so, yeah, I gave it a 6.
Awesome. And Brandon?
Yeah, I hadn't been reading Strange Academy up until this point, so I had to catch up quite a bit. But I think the series has definitely kind of grown on me because, you know, I didn't really have any interest in it when it started, but kind of being able to read through the past 8 issues has definitely let the characters grow on me a lot. So kind of learning more about their backstories and seeing their parents, that was also a lot of fun. And then, you know, the tease at the end with the field trip is definitely something to look forward to. So I think I've got a lot more stock in this series. And then I'm not the biggest Humberto Ramos fan, just in terms of his art. Sometimes I can find it very hit or miss, but I think that there were a lot more hits in this issue. So I definitely enjoyed that aspect more than I anticipated. So I would probably give this one a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10 on a good day.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I've been a fan of Strange Academy since it started up. It did take a break there in the beginning with COVID and all, but I've grown to like it, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I like sort of this different aspect of both of Doctor Strange and sort of these characters as they're going through it, because we're getting a chance to see characters like Magic, Dr. Voodoo, and Doctor Strange in a slightly different way, and that's growing on me a lot. And I can't wait to see like it tell, you know, the final pieces of its bigger story. So with that, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope this one continues for a little while. That said, I got just the weirdest kick, and I don't know why. In this issue, there's a panel with Scarlet Witch as, you know, Mrs. Maximoff, the teacher, and she's wearing her red sort of leotard outfit and her crown, and then she's got a pink blouse on underneath her leotard. So it's just coming out of her costume, that she's just a regular teacher wearing a Scarlet Witch costume kind of over top of her clothes. And it was just, it cracked me up. It's the silliest panel, and it's the type of stuff that we're seeing in this. And, you know, there was an earlier issue of Strange Academy where we saw a couple of the teachers like mailboxes in their email inboxes, which had a couple hidden jokes from the kids being like, hey, I'm sorry this is late, but it's totally legit. My email was down. You know, just the regular stuff. And it's fun, and I like it. And I gave this issue a 7.5. I liked the backstories, but it didn't go anywhere. And I feel like when Strange Academy wants to tell something bigger and more dramatic, I think it has the gravity to do it. But I also understand that it wants to spend its time on these different characters. And I do like sort of this sort of visibly shouldn't be a good guy Doyle Dormammu character. Like, he's the son of Dormammu. He looks like Dormammu. But then they put him in these sweater vests, and he's doing okay with his classmates and his friends. And it's like, I kind of hope they do something with him that really like earns this. Yeah. And he isn't just like, hey, remember that time Dormammu had a kid in a prep school. So with that, we will move on to Eternals number 3, brought to us by writer Kieran Gillen, artist Esad Ribic, color artist Matthew Wilson, and lettering by Clayton Cowles. Take it away on Eternals number 3, Brandon.
Oh, absolutely. So this issue, we get to meet Thena, and as she is described, she is the book and the blade. You would likely like her, she would likely like you, basically showing us that Thena is someone who is very likable, which is good because we reveal that she, basically after having left the Eternal families, decided to set up camp with their mortal enemies, the Deviants, in Lemuria. And so basically this issue kind of revolves around the Eternals reconciling with Thena after having left, after having been resurrected, because, as we know, the Eternals died at an earlier point during, I believe, Jason Aaron's Avengers, and as of now, they're investigating the big mystery, which is who killed Zuras, and Zuras is kind of the head Eternal. And so they're kind of casting doubt on Thena, particularly because of her past with Deviants. She's been known to take lovers in the past. She kind of gives them more sympathy. And kind of when she's being questioned about it by the other Eternals, she's, you know, revealing that she had a previous argument with her father where she had given a threat, but obviously she's saying, well, I didn't have any hand in this. It was a threat, but I didn't genuinely mean it. Meanwhile, in New York City, at the Robeson residence, we shift over to Icarus, who is still watching over the house of Toby Robeson, who he had been shown a vision of in the last issue, basically saying that, something would happen to him. And so Icarus kind of takes it upon himself to make sure that he's protecting the Robeson family at all times. And so we get to see a lot of really fun interaction between Icarus and the Robeson family, especially when he's just kind of telling them, what an Eternal actually is. And we get this beautiful panel where it's just them staring shocked at Icarus while he's drinking coffee. And then he's basically just like, this is good coffee. So I loved that. And then we flash back to Lemuria, where Cersei is kind of continuously asking Athena questions about, why she may have a motive to have killed Zuras. And then we go into a flashback 100,000 years ago to the last time that Athena had kind of taken a deviant lover, and how the deviant had basically used her as a way to upgrade himself and his people. So, and this is one thing that I particularly love about this issue, but this series as well, is it's really taking its time to not only flesh out the Eternals as they are now, but as they were then, kind of giving them this great storied past, especially, for people who were totally unfamiliar with the Eternals like I am. So we flash back to Lemuria, where they're basically, Cersei's still kind of giving Athena crap about, how she feels she doesn't trust him. And then the machine basically relays a message from Druig, and Druig reveals that he had returned to Polaria to receive orders from their ruler, who's known as the Supreme Falcon. And we reveal that that entire, basically, colony has been slaughtered. And given that, Druig is the only one at the scene, and given that Druig is now basically the de facto ruler of Polaria, it gives the Eternals motive to believe that Druig may possibly be a suspect in the murder of Zuras. And that's how our issue ends. So, I really can't praise this series enough. I'm just loving Kieran Gillen's, I don't know that I'd call it a reinvention of the Eternals, but definitely a greater exploration of the Eternals. And it certainly pairs very well with the artwork by Asad Ribic, who really just brings to life a kind of epic scope, especially in his landscapes, even if a lot of the scenes are just kind of dialogue back and forth between the characters. I mean, there are just some really standout moments where, they're standing in the cavern, and they're facing Athena's deviant ruler, or even on the third page where, I don't know if it's the third page, but the page basically where, Athena is looking up at Lemuria, and you get a beautiful splash page of Lemuria. It's just really remarkable to look at. So, like I said, this approach and exploration of the Eternals, their, storied history and this kind of murder mystery all tying together, while it can definitely be overwhelming, it's just really fascinating to me, especially as someone who doesn't really know a lot about the actual stories of the Eternals, knows more about the publication history of the Eternals, but it's still fascinating nonetheless. So I gave this one a 9 out of 10. I absolutely loved it.
All right. And Nicole?
So I'm also going into this without knowing a super, deep lore about the Eternals. I'm not very familiar with them, but I am enjoying this series. I like that it gives you a good feeling of how these characters are, and it helps explain to newer people like myself kind of the atmosphere in which the Eternals occurs, especially when it shows you it jumps back almost. I also think that it was very entertaining and kind of cute, and I liked it a lot. I also really liked the art style. I gave this one an 8.
Thanks, Nicole. I also gave this one an 8. So first off, the art. Holy smokes. This is a beautiful series.
Oh, yeah. Every time they get Asad Ribic for anything, it's it's going to be good.
Especially, I really liked the part with Icarus in the Robeson residence, the contrast of him. He still looks like he's in the same style, of course, and he looks like them, but he's also so distinctly out of place in every panel next to these humans, just in sort of the way that they stand and the way that they're shaped. Just, you can tell that he's an Eternal.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous to look at. As someone who also isn't a big, like, person who's super familiar with the Eternals, this comic worked for me in terms of understanding what it was about and things like that. But I am also not aware of a lot of the moments that led into this. I don't have a history with Cersei or Athena or Icarus. I am definitely excited to see more. I gave it an 8 out of 10 because I really just want to look at more pages of this comic, really sort of regardless of what the panels look like or what the panels say.
I mean, I would say definitely if you're enjoying this book so far, and you're looking for an Eternals book that's similar to this, the Neil Gaiman Eternals run, it's 7 issues, so it's definitely easy to get through, is a big influence on this one, especially because I think it talks about the first issue where it talks about like something that Sprite did, and I'm pretty sure that's tied to that run in particular. I haven't read it in a while, so I'd have to refresh my memory. But yeah, I would just say if you're looking for interesting takes on the Eternals outside of Jack Kirby, you can't go wrong with Neil Gaiman.
Awesome. And I definitely want to shout out that this comic, the piece with it does these dark pages with names on them in a couple different places to really just sort of add effect to this comic. And I will say, I loved the one
infographics.
Yeah, the one page where it just says Lemuria, right after that huge splash page like you're talking about. It says initial population 100, current population, and then it cuts to the next page, and it says page 7 out of 10,000, and it's just a wall of names. Just a huge, unyielding, like, block of names, and it's aesthetically striking, and it sends the exact drama that you wanted to see, like, you know, how big did this population get? Yeah, they sold it. And then also just being able to read a bunch of deviant names kind of made me laugh.
Yeah.
One of the ones I remember reading was like Carrig Mac's Grass Scissor, and Grass Scissor has, I think, 7 S's in it.
Yeah, if anyone follows Kieran Gillen's newsletter, which I definitely would recommend, it's very entertaining. Kieran basically talked about how he used a coding script to basically just, I guess, write an algorithm that churned out a bunch of different Eternal names. And he talked about like trying to make it go public. I don't know if they can yet, just because like there might be some legal stuff, whether they can or not. But if they make that accessible, I'd love to do it, because you could just generate like endless deviant names, and I would have a lot of fun with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really cool. So next on our list, we've got Taskmaster number 4 from writer Jed MacKay with artist Alessandro Vitti, color artist Guru Effects, and lettering by Joe Caramagna. Nicole, how about you give us a summary on Taskmaster number 4?
All right, so we open up with our main man Tony jumping out of an airplane, and he really sets the scene super well. He goes right into the middle of a Wakandan army, and in just classic, himself is like, yep, I got a plan. He's, he's telling puns, he's having fun with it, but he's getting captured by the Wakandan military. And they, they bring him into a room. There's this really nice fight scene that looks really well choreographed. And then, he's brought to a secret room with Nick Fury. And then you see Black Widow kind of finding him. It's unclear where she is, but like she's around. So this issue was in a different, it's not the first issue of this story, but it's the first one that I was able to read. So From what I understand, Tony is essentially being framed for a murder that he didn't do, which is, not really like him. And Black Widow believes that he did it, and she's chasing him. She eventually finds him in Wakanda. Presumably. It's not official yet, but it's heavily implied at the end of this comic. It was a fun read. I liked the fighting scene a lot. And I thought that the imagery at the beginning set the scene very well for what was about to happen. It felt like a heist. It felt very natural for Taskmaster, especially. And it really drives home kind of like this almost seriousness that you feel when you know that there's going to be Wakanda military involved. But I did like this one a lot. I gave it a 7.
Awesome. And Brandon?
Yeah, this series has been kind of fun, kind of an interesting take on Taskmaster. And like Nikki said, I have been interested in the whole plot angle with Tony and just kind of following it along. So I don't really have a ton of thoughts for this one. I think I was more interested in the fight sequence in this particular issue than I was in anything else. So, I got to give the credit to the artist, Alessandro Vitti. I feel like he's just did a great job illustrating the action here. And so I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10. I think the art definitely helped carry it, for me at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed this one. This Taskmaster series, I do really like it. I like seeing more of Taskmaster, and I like seeing him sort of through these different lenses, and this one is definitely giving us a shot at that. But this series has definitely had a strong focus on sort of these striking, visceral fight choreography that we've seen with him, and that's something that you need with Taskmaster. Like, that's literally his superpower, is really precise movements.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like I said, I think they definitely chose the right artist for this book, because illustrating that action definitely does a good job.
Absolutely. And yeah, the stage was set really good, and then we did spend most of this issue just sort of going from a Wakandan military tussle to a tussle between him and Okoye, which I understood the sort of the pseudo reason that they gave in the plot, but if I'm going to put like my glasses on and talk about this issue, it kind of also just felt like all right, let's take this issue to do a who would win, Taskmaster versus Okoye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that it, needing Okoye's movements memorized in Taskmaster works as a plot element, I suppose. But it really also just writes like an excuse to have Taskmaster fight this other really talented non-meta human fighter.
Yeah.
And, because those are the things people love. Like, forums are rife with, could Taskmaster beat so-and-so? This person doesn't have the strength to break his bones in a single hit. Could he beat them? Could he beat them? And I do love Taskmaster talking about movements and fighting style. When he's well written, it's really cool to have him break that stuff down. Earlier in this series, we get the panel of him talking about the moves he's stolen from people. And I love that one panel where he's naming his moves, but he doesn't know what other characters call their moves. So it's just the sidekick that Iron Fist uses and that throw Captain America used to toss me out a window. And so I got a kick out of that. And so in this, like, we're getting some of that. And I feel like Taskmaster's charm really comes in exploring sort of the hand-to-hand of these other characters. There's that famous Moon Knight versus Taskmaster fight that a lot of people loved.
Yeah, and Taskmaster versus Captain America in, what was it? I think issue 4 of the most recent volume of Captain America. It was beautifully illustrated by Lanil Yu, and that was just a great... he lost, but still a great example of his ability to adapt. And, shows versatility.
Yeah, and I don't know, the one quote that always stays with me from that Moon Knight fight is talking about Moon Knight's fighting style as, if I could go my whole life without having someone's movements in my head, it would be yours. You never found a punch you didn't want to take to the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's got some of that Taskmaster charm. The series hasn't knocked it out of the park for me. if I'm not mistaken, this is the series that introduced, oh man, I wish I could remember his name offhand. The sort of the Korean super soldier.
Oh yeah, I can't think of the name.
Yeah. I wish I had that written down, but I hope we see some more in that vein, just because I'm excited to see, like, when we have this character who is a merc, who's going global, and we get a chance to shine a light on some new characters and get some diverse voices out there. I think that works really well. And, you know, he went to Wakanda, he went to Korea in like 4 issues, but in this issue, I don't feel like we explored as much.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah, so I gave it a 7 out of 10. The fights are nice. It's good. The writing is decent enough. Taskmaster is entertaining. He's a smart ass. He always has been. And if you want to watch who would win, Taskmaster versus Okoye, this is your issue. Mm-hmm. It's time to settle some bets. Yeah. Leaving Taskmaster number 4, we're going on to Daredevil number 28 by writer Chip Zdarsky, artist Mark Cicchetto, color by Marcia Moniz, and letters by Clayton Cowles and Brandon. Let's hear about Daredevil 28.
Absolutely. This is continuing the story of Daredevil in prison, and even though that is something that's been explored before, I think one of the things that this issue highlights is how different Matt Murdock being in prison as Daredevil versus, you know, Matt Murdock being in prison as Matt Murdock, because him, you know, being in prison as Daredevil obviously affords, you know, certain privileges that the regular inmate doesn't really have. And so I think a lot of the things that just really grabbed me about this issue was seeing Daredevil interact with the different inmates, particularly, I believe the inmate's name is Nick, who kind of has a stutter and is kind of looking for protection. And, you know, Matt is able to basically save him from a shower brawl, only for the issue to reveal that, unfortunately, Nick takes his life towards the end. And we kind of see Matt building his relationship with the prison doctor as well, who's kind of talking to him about, you know, why are you here? What is the purpose of you being in prison? Because obviously it's not going to be the same situation as any other prisoner. Obviously, being a masked hero affords you certain privileges and things like that. And then we do get brief flashback scenes to Kingpin and to Elektra, kind of tying up some of the plot threads that were set. Well, not really tying up, but kind of continuing the plot threads that were set up in King in Black, where Elektra has taken in a young girl whose mother was killed during the King in Black invasion, and then Kingpin is kind of just checking in on Mary after she was possessed by one of the symbiotes in King in Black. So while this issue does juggle 3 plots, I think it does it fairly well, and in a way that feels particularly heartfelt, especially the story with Matt being in prison. And I just really love this angle that Zdarsky is exploring of, you know, Matt being in prison as Daredevil and kind of the complications that he has and feels, you know, what kind of penance he's trying to put himself under, but also kind of highlighting, you know, the hypocrisy of you're kind of putting yourself in this position, but it's not the same as everyone else. You know, obviously you being in prison as a superhero is going to be different. And it's kind of hypocritical of you to talk about looking for absolution when, you know, your very presence in prison just isn't going to be equal. So I just really love what this series is exploring, and I gave this issue a 9 out of 10, definitely a 9.5 on a good day. I love Zdarsky's Daredevil. It's just continuously great, continuously knocks it out of the park, and I think it goes without saying that the art by Marco Cicchetto is just absolutely gorgeous on every page.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Brandon. Nicole, what did you think about this?
So I'm not super familiar with Daredevil either, but I really liked this. I found it very entertaining. I thought it was very well paced, and I really adored the art style. I gave this one an 8.
Awesome. Yeah. I really liked this. I haven't caught all the way up with Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil. I read a few of the issues that came before this to make sure I was on the right track, but I want to start over at number 1.
Oh yeah, you gotta
and actually give it the time it deserves, because it is so good.
Yeah, it's a slow build, I'll say. Because I know when I went into this series way back in February 2019, which is only 2 years ago, but it feels like so long ago. But it was definitely a slow build, kind of, I would say your run-of-the-mill Daredevil at first. There are some interesting themes that it explores, but for me, I think it really starts to pick up in the second arc, and just kind of, goes off from there. Like it really just explores what it means to be Daredevil in such an interesting way that, I absolutely adore.
Mm-hmm. I really do. And Daredevil has always been such an interesting character for that. Yeah. Like you talked about his sort of unique situation and how he interacts with Absolution. And that has always been sort of a founding piece in Daredevil, is this inability to say no to what he believes is the solution, but also this inability to give himself absolution.
Oh yeah.
So many heroes sleep at night with what they do, not being all that different from Daredevil. But he's always been a Catholic boy, and
he carries that Catholic guilt.
Yeah, all the way through. And it's so well written here with Zdarsky, and I really like it. And you did say it juggles the three really well, but I also like, in each of these issues, I feel like they decide, all right, we're gonna talk a bit about, the Kingpin, we're gonna talk a bit about Elektra, and we're gonna talk a bit about Daredevil. But each one they sort of say like, all right, but this is Daredevil's turn. We're gonna spend a few more pages with Matt. This is where the meat's gonna be, and then we're gonna just remind you that, hey, Elektra's doing something, Kingpin's doing something, and then we're gonna tease next issue, some what looks like some more Elektra content.
Oh yeah, but I do love the approach of Elektra as Daredevil, because my guess is it's gonna lead to, her kind of softening up a little bit and discovering what it means to be a symbol in Hell's Kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so I don't know if I said my rating yet, but I gave this one a 9 out of 10 as well. I'm a big fan of what Zdarsky's doing with Mr. Murdoch, and I want to see more. And with that, we come to our final issue of the week, the final piece of the Wolverine Black, White, and Blood anthology series, featuring 3 short stories: The Art of Loss by writer Kelly Thompson, artist Carrie Randolph, with Reeve What You Sow by writer Ed Brisson, and artist Leonard Kirk, with Andre Mosa on the Reds as a colorist, and Sticks and Stones by Stephen S. DeKnight, with artists by Paulo Siqueira, inks by Oren Jr., and Andre Mosa on the Reds again. Nikki, how about you give us a summary with what we can expect from Black, White, and Blood number 4?
Of course. So it starts off with The Art of Loss, which is about essentially Mystique coming to terms with Rogue having, her own life. And it's about, the trials that Mystique has had to go through to protect Rogue for her whole life. And it's also about Wolverine getting left at the altar by Mariko. The next one on the list is Reeve What You Sow, which is not quite as deep as the last one somehow, but way more brutal. In this one, Wolverine has a fight scene with some sharks after being on a cruise ship, and then some big bads come in. From what I understood, they were just like these scuba divers that hate mutants. I don't really know the lore of them, but they got on the cruise ship and they fought, and then Wolverine had to fight some sharks, so that was pretty cool. And then the last one is Sticks and Stones, sorry. The last one is Sticks and Stones, where Wolverine is catapulted into the past with a bunch of dinosaurs. And he just immediately starts fighting like these huge giant dinosaurs, and there's a lot of body gore. And then there are two characters now that talk. One of them is Garrick the Petrified Man, and the other one is a pterodactyl, whose name I didn't catch.
Sauron.
Yeah, Sauron. Old X-Men foe.
Not to be confused with the Dark Lord of the Rings, but spelled the same.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, so Wolverine basically looks at Kirk and just immediately decapitates him. And then, as kind of almost a twist, he ends up, like, going toe-to-toe with Sauron instead. And that's where we're left off. So I'm a big fan of the X-Men series, and I'm clearly a big fan of Wolverine because of that. But I think everyone kind of is. I do enjoy seeing kind of, you know, other things he does that are like super dramatic, but it's Wolverine, so he's like monotone. It's kind of hilarious. Like he's just kind of having fun, like killing all these people and all these monsters, and it's almost silly at like a very, like, if you take a big step back, it's very silly, and I like that a lot. I also really like this art style. I gave this a 9.
Awesome. And Brandon?
Yeah, this series has been kind of great for me, and I'll be sad to see it go. Just because, I mean, you know, I would say that I am a fan of Wolverine, but I don't know how much I like him in large quantities. Like, I'm someone that if I had to read like 50 issues of Wolverine, it would probably be a bit hard for me to get through. But this was perfect. It was, you know, 4 monthly issues, and each one is a collection of 3 10-page one-and-done stories, which is perfect. And you could just kind of tell a really awesome Wolverine story. And it's in black and red and white, which just looks awesome objectively, I think, anyway. So yeah, I think for me, the standout story of this issue is definitely the Kelly Thompson one. Art-wise, I really loved Kari Randolph's pencils and how he was kind of able to incorporate red into his issue, especially sometimes with the background. Like, I thought that was an interesting choice, because it will sometimes shift from being red into gray. But yeah, no, I think it has just been a really interesting experiment with Wolverine. I can't say that there was really any issue that had bad stories, but, you know, this one in particular, well, I wouldn't say it was my favorite of the anthology series so far. It definitely had some really solid stories. So I gave this one an 8 out of 10.
Awesome. Thanks. I liked this book. I really did. I hadn't paid much attention to the Black, White, and Blood before this, but having read through a handful of them now, I definitely enjoyed this. And I gave this one an 8 out of 10. But I think for me, that 8 out of 10 is carried by the art.
Yeah, for sure.
And specifically by the issue, or the short story in this one, Art of Loss. The drama between Mystique dealing with her grief and Wolverine dealing with his grief, and it really just coming out in these self-destructive tendencies, it worked for me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I liked the way they spoke. They were well written. Like, Kelly Thompson just nailed the feel that I wanted from that story. And then at the end, where, you know, Storm and Wolverine are looking for a bar, there's this one panel where the sky is drawn with this striking red that sort of sends to me this sort of message of a sunrise, that they're looking for a bar at what I could only describe as probably 5 a.m. Like, it was such a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
At the end of a weirdly heartwarming story involving Mystique and Wolverine just wanting to kill each other for 6 of its pages. But I was there for it. And Art of Loss really worked for me.
Oh, yeah.
Reeve What You Sow was a half-decent story. Wolverine fights some sharks and fights some mutant haters, which was good fun. And it was him really talking about blood for blood and him sort of doing things the way he does whenever the X-Men leave him alone, which is sort of the love it, hate it part of his character, depending on who you are. You know, and I'm okay with it. You don't have a person whose superpower is flesh-rending claws without, hurting people.
Yeah, some kind of violence.
Yeah. And then the Sticks and Stones to close it out was bittersweet, because while I enjoyed it because it was a bit comical, but Sauron he's really just he's a cartoon character. He's hard to take seriously as a villain. Yeah. And the fight with the petrified man ending in 1 second was so funny. So as much as I enjoyed it for it gave me a chuckle, I was sort of I think if they had switched the order and this ended on something like Art of Loss, sort of that,
it left you with a more satisfied feeling.
I would have been left with a more satisfied feeling, and it would have left on sort of that haunting, one of the things that I feel to me is a cornerstone of Wolverine is this: I'm never going to die, I'm never going to age, and I'm never going to feel better about all of these emotional scars that I'm building up. Every bad thing that happens to me, I get to carry for longer than everyone else does. And so having that just sort of melancholy at the end would have worked so much better than I think that the panel of, Wolverine and the pterodactyl man are going to fight.
Yeah.
So I gave it an 8 out of 10. I liked it. I liked the series. I'm looking forward to what they do with Black, White, and Blood.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're due for a Carnage Black, White, and Blood next. I believe that is either next month or the month after.
And following that, a Deadpool Black, White, and Blood. And I don't know why, but I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
All right. And that brings us to the end of our list for the evening. I feel like we had a pretty good lineup this week. Nothing that I really just panned, and I don't think anything that we're going to get a bunch of hate in the comments for.
No.
So now everyone's favorite part, the part where we pick our favorite 3 from the issue and our best moment. So we'll start with Nicole. What were your top 3 issues, and what was your best moment out of all these issues?
So my top 3 issues were Wolverine, Black, White, and Blood, Eternals, and Strange Academy. My moment from this one was in Nonstop Spider-Man, where he says "big brain play."
Yeah, I like that too. That panel,
yeah.
It's so
even though it's a meme and you can tell it's a meme and it's winking right at the camera. It's a really dynamic looking panel, and I really enjoyed that one too.
I want that as a poster.
That would be nice.
That's awesome. Brandon, how about you?
Coming in at number 3, I had Immortal Hulk. Super solid issue, moves it forward. And as always, I love the body horror aesthetic of Immortal Hulk, and I'm super interested to see what's going on in the below place in the next issue. For number 2, I had Eternals. Like I said, absolutely love the art, absolutely love the story so far, or at least this exploration of the Eternals, and I'm definitely interested to see where that one's going, and what kind of plans Kieran Gillen has for the Eternals. And then at number 1, I have Daredevil. It's just one of my absolute favorite series at the moment, and it seems like Chip Zdarsky hands out a knockout with each issue, which leads into my moment of the week, which is the moment where the Doctor basically informs Daredevil that Nick had committed suicide, and it's just kind of this moment where, Daredevil has his hand pressed against the wall and his head pressed against the wall, and you can kind of see the shadow of his mask, and it's just a really beautiful panel. It's definitely my moment of the week.
Awesome. Yeah, my top 3 goes to Wolverine, Black, White, and Blood. the Eternals and then topping it out with Daredevil at the first place. It was a good issue for Daredevil. You already touched on all the reasons why. We touched on what I liked about Wolverine, and really just the art in Black, White, and Blood has been worth the read almost in and of itself.
Yeah. And I would encourage people to check out those other issues because the art there is just absolutely phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. And then Eternals, it's very different. It's very unique. And this issue doesn't feel like a Marvel comic. There's really nothing that I could describe as an action sequence in this entire book, but it is eye candy and it is engaging. Meeting for me, what is not the first time, but my first like in-depth time, Cersei and Thena and Icarus in this way. It's really good. And it's cool to see, Icarus interacting with these normal humans and Icarus, the coffee's good. It's so alien and interesting, and it captures exactly how I kind of felt about the Eternals before, in that I knew they were different and I couldn't place why. But then when you look at them, it's just like, right, because they're this. Yeah. It's and for my favorite moment of the week, I've got to give it to, I think, the end of Immortal Hulk with the shot in the below place where you see that body horror leader monster looking like something out of like art of like Baphomet, like crazy demonic weird pictures, and Joe Fixit being like, I'm gonna spit in his face.
Don't really have anything else.
Like it was a good moment, and it made me excited to spend some time in Immortal Hulk, because it's
for sure.
It's got weird stakes, and that panel really sells it, that even though the stakes are different, we've got a Hulk who's, I think, died multiple times in this run.
Oh yeah.
Making us no stranger to it. And I'm still engaged. I'm here for it. And now we've picked our top 3, but it's time to roll out
the biggest thinker.
Oh, that's nasty.
All right, Nicole, what was your worst one this week?
Thor and Loki, Double Trouble.
And Brandon?
Yeah, I'd probably have to go with Thor, Loki, Double Trouble. Just not a bad book by any means, but didn't really do it for me. I don't know. Like I said, I just don't think I'm the right age demographic for this.
Mm-hmm. I have Deadpool's Nerdy 30 technically as my lowest score on my scorecard here. However, it being an anthology book and not all of it being unreadable, and it having a different place in the market. But then again, so does Thor and Loki. So it's hard for me to pick a true lowest one here, because out of the ones that are actual comics in a series here, Thor and Loki is my lowest scoring, but it is also distinctly for a different audience. I just think, at this point, you've heard us talk about how these two, if you're a collector looking for something that's going to fill a satisfying hole in your shelf, neither of these are going to do it, but neither of them are distinctly an awful choice. You're not going to go wrong with these.
I agree.
All right. Then that's the show. As always, thank you to my hosts, Nicole and Brandon. Thank you to all you amazing humans out here. Thank you so very much for listening. You're the reason why we do this. Visit campsite.bio/notarobotcomics to hear all our episodes on nearly any podcast platform, and patreon.com/notarobotpodcast for the exclusive content that we make for our patrons from all our offerings: Kids Corner, Real Talk, movies, TV, and more. Again, starting at just $1 a month. Visit notarobotpodcast.com, and that will take you everywhere you need to go for everything Not a Robot. And with that, there's only one way we say goodbye around here. Until next time, be good to each other, and don't be a robot.
I'm Just